There we go. Sorry. It takes a second. Go ahead.
And we are live. Thanks to everyone for joining us on the Sex Worker Nation YouTube channel. This discussion panel is an Erotic Service Providers Union report back after the Summer Institute on Union Women 2018 training. Sounds like it was very informational. I will be your host and facilitator, Rachel Sonoma. You can find me on Twitter, Rachel Sonoma1. The Summer Institute for Union Women is an annual regional event that rotates locations throughout the western part of the United States and Canada. This union organizing school promotes women in leadership in unions and community organizations throughout the United States. The location for next year's Summer Institute on Union Women hasn't been decided yet, but it could be in Vancouver, British Columbia. That would be beautiful if it is. For this discussion, we have members of the Erotic Service Providers Union, Maxine Dugan, Domina, Elle, and Kristen DiAngelo of SWOP Sacramento. Each attended the 2018 Summer Institute training and will be reporting on their experiences. Feel free to comment and ask questions in the chat feature on this channel. We will open up the conversation for questions after the panelists speak. Each speaker will introduce themselves, their org, and speak for 7 minutes in the order listed below, offering highlights on what they experienced and learned. So speakers, please introduce yourselves however you want, your organization, what track you chose for your core class at the training. List 3 to 5 things that you learned, the best part of the conference, and how sex workers would benefit from attending in the future. So we have Maxine speaking first, then Kristen, and then Elle. Ready?
Yeah.
Maxine, let's hear what you have to say.
So I'm Maxine Dugan of the Erotic Service Providers Union. I've worked as an erotic service provider for 28 years, and I pretty much plan on working for another 28 more. You know, we're on Twitter at the ESPU Union, and our website is espu-usa.com. The Summer Institute for Union Women you know, has several core classes to choose from. These classes are held every morning for 3 hours for the 4 days of the school. They help bring focus to particular areas. The core classes are usually like media, political, organizing, collective bargaining. And since I'd already taken most of those core classes from the school in years past as I've attended, I chose the leadership as my core class this time. Our facilitator for the leadership core class was a woman who was the head of the British Columbia Labor Federation, which was interesting to me because I had met her in years previous at other Summer Institute for Union Women's Schools where she had been the president of the British Columbia Teachers Association then. So, you know, she had continued on and provided, you know, her leadership. Anyway, our other 2 teachers that helped facilitate our class were, one had been, worked for the U.S. national body, which is the AFL-CIO on their immigration policy and coordinator, and the other leader was an organizer out of Unite Here, which is working on hotel organizing, and so then at one point the whole school was, of the 250 women at the school, were bused to the Hyatt Hotel in Santa Rosa to support Unite Here's campaign to organize those hotel workers to push their boss to sign their contracts. So that was very exciting. One of the activities we did to in our core leadership class was to assess our leadership style. So this was a type of self-assessment to be able to discuss our strengths and weaknesses as leaders, and to talk about you know, how we might improve or do better. And for me, it was very eye-opening because some of my strengths, you know, I knew, but it helped me focus better on what my weaknesses were and strategies to remedy them or to work with others to help, offset those. We did numerous other exercises. We did one called the barriers that women face in leadership, identifying those bricks in the wall, so to speak. We use that euphemism because it was so timely at this time. But, we just talked about, barriers to leadership and to, union organizing, that anywhere from personal to structural. So things like, people being called bitches, or, everybody had been called a bitch at one point, right? When they were trying to assert themselves or, assert their opinion or assert, their leadership. Many women, had been, all identified with being told that they were hard to work with, right? That's kind of, standard across the board, what women in leadership are always, told about ourselves. And then we identified some, remedies for these types of barriers, both, personal and the structural, about, things that had to do with the lack of education, the lack of access to support for leadership. Women perform a lot of unpaid tasks, both at home and at work. So to, learn some strategies to get some support to stop doing all that. And we talked about, other structural, barriers, everything from self-worth affirming exercises to, banding together to address the structural barriers, like organizing women, movement building and gaining access to trainings. So one of the other important things I was reminded about in this leadership class is the idea of the difference between organized labor and the labor movement. Organized labor is comprised of workers who are working under a collectively bargained contract, as those workers make up the middle class. They're the backbone of our economy. And when organized labor status is diminished through union busting, delays in contract negotiation, or, being forced to take reduced benefits, or, they have their jobs shipped overseas, the whole economy is weaker. So the labor movement is made up of everyone who surrounds the labor movement. So that would be like unorganized workers, non-traditional workers, labor media like labor radio or video shows, labor journalism, labor conferences, labor newspapers, labor educational institutions like the Labor Center that put on this conference, worker centers, workers with no legal status, support organizations like Jobs for Justice, or elected officials who support organized labor, and worker collectives. So, how would this apply to the sex industry is that the lusty lady was the only collectively bargained workforce that, we've had. They were able to collectivize as a business, so they had to deal with another layer of being responsible for their own management of their business. And as I recall, that was quite a time-consuming activity. They were finally forced to close when the landlord raised the rent so high that they couldn't pay it, and they were forced to close. Another factor that was always threatening, the lusty lady as a business was that there were nearby competing clubs that provided more direct services. So, the sex workers no longer have an organized labor entity. So, some folks who would be considered to be in the sex worker movement would be all the different types of workers from different types of venues, people working independent to worker collectives. Because of the laws that criminalize our workspaces and our association to be in mutual aid to benefit our business, workers aren't afforded the space to collectivize as much, to be able to work under,
Maxine,
yeah.
Maxine, 10-minute warning. Time to wrap it up.
Okay.
10 seconds.
Oh, 10 seconds. Okay. Well, I can talk about more stuff with that. I did do one of the afternoon workshops about non-traditional and invisible workers with Jobs for Justice. And so I might be doing that as a webinar at some point in the future so everybody can see that.
Well, thank you, Maxine. That sounds like you got a lot out of that leadership class. I have some questions when we're done. Kristen, let's hear about your experience.
Okay. I'm Kristen DiAngelo from the Sex Workers Outreach Project, Sacramento. I'm the executive director. And this was my first year at the Summer Institute on Union Women. It was amazing. I really learned a lot, and I'm really grateful that the two women who were the instructors of my class actually helped me take information that was geared toward organizations that are so far ahead of us because they have rights that we don't, and sort of apply it to the sex trade and to the things we're going through. So my core class was called Mobilizing Members in Difficult Times. And I came out with a lot of good stuff. One of the first things, so you'd asked about 5 things that we came out with, and one of the things that they presented to me, which I hadn't ever read before, was something called the Axioms for Organizers by Fred Ross Sr. And it's a list of 7 axioms that that organizers should know. And I only want to talk about the first one because the first one, to me, like it so explains some of the things that I was doing that were challenging. And that is, if you think that you can do it for people, you've stopped understanding what it means to be an organizer. And we talked about that for a while. And it's like so often as organizers get burnt out because we're trying to do everything instead of organize the people who are fighting for their rights to do the work with you. And so like that alone was a huge thing that I learned. One of the things that we also that we talked about are the things that as organizers and as a trade, the sex trade, as a group of people that keep us from moving forward and fighting the fights that we fight. And one of the things that, how they taught it, but what they did, I'm going to explain how they changed it for me, was called How the Boss Keeps Us Disorganized, and how that stops us from achieving our rights. And what they did is they helped me flip it so it's how the government, the politicians, even people who are in our own communities, you know, there are clients that when we speak out say, oh, you won't get paid this much money if you organize. So the techniques that people use to stop us from moving forward. And I'm going to share the 4 of them with you that there are and that we really focused on. One is fear of conflict and retaliation. We all back up when we're afraid. And then we talked about overcoming that. We talked about hopelessness, how people will sell us hopelessness. And I've been working on a banking bill, and it's crazy because one of the people who I've been working with has been trying to sell me hopelessness of why this is going to happen anyway. And so it was really easy to spot when I heard that. The third one was division, pitting workers against each other's and factions against each other's and the antis against us and the, you know, that conquer and divide. Like it's not just the outside, like we can implode from inside if we're not really careful and if we don't really stay focused on this idea of labor rights and decriminalization. And the last one was confusion. You know, we get all kinds of messages from society and from even, you know, people who say they want to help us, that keeps us from actually stopping and understanding that this is all about labor rights. So for me, that was very, very powerful. And one of the things we focused on in the class was that our primary goals were becoming good organizers. And to become good organizers, we had to move people with hope and a plan to win. So we can't just sit there and go, oh yeah, we can do it, we can do it. There has to be a plan. Like it has to be a cohesive plan where we have a strategy to move forward. So for me, that was very important. Okay. I also learned that we have some badass allies there. So, and what I mean by that was when I was sitting in the class, I know in the beginning when I announced who I was, there was a group of people who, you know, like that look comes over their face like, oh, hell no. We weren't in for this. Like we didn't expect this here. So there was that group. But what happened by the end of it? Like by the end of it, those very people who in the beginning, I know there was some judgment and we worked on moving that judgment aside. They actually were stepping up and helping me. Let me give you an example. One of our instructors, and I don't think she had the judgment in the beginning, but by the end, we were talking about this fight with the banking bill and it criminalizing cash. And she's from the United Farm Workers Union. And she started saying, that bill might affect us too. Like, I think they need to hear about that. That bill, like, together, see, and that was the word, together we can make a difference. And so for me, that was hugely, hugely powerful. I learned a lot more. I guess the last thing that applied to my life is we've done research here, and we've done it with an IRB certified researcher. And it was like a pretty clinical kind of type of research, because that's what it had to be, you know, to do this needs analysis. And I took a class on worker participatory research. And I think the thing we missed in our research was we didn't engage the very people who participated in it to fight for themselves. Like, we went out and began fighting for them, but we didn't engage them because they didn't feel like they were a part of the process. They thought they were just answering questions, which they were, because I didn't know how to do it the other way. And for me, that was like amazingly powerful. So last thing, because I know my time's up, that I learned was at the action on the last day. And I've done a number of actions. Like, it's something I sort of like to do. I don't know, it gives me a chance to scream and, you know, get out of my shell. So I like actions. So on the last day we did an action, and I've done a lot of them. And I, within 2 minutes there, knew one of the things that we have done very, very wrong. I got off a bus and they handed me this card that captured data. They wanted my phone number. They wanted my email address. They wanted to know what organization I was. They wanted to know if I wanted to be notified. And as we circled around and came back, they took those cards back. Now, they ran out before everybody got those cards. But, you know, I get information when we do any kind of speaking event. I had never thought of doing that at an action, making sure that you build each time so you have more and more people to go forward, that you're not recreating that base, which it seems like it would be simple knowledge, but I've missed that. So that was the last thing. Okay, that's it. It was amazing.
Thank you very much, Kristen. All right. Elle, would you please tell about the classes that you took?
Well, I knew that it was going to be tough after being the last person to speak after Kristen and Maxine, because I figured they'd probably be making some of the same points, and that's exactly what happened. But anyway, I am Domina, Elle, and I'm in Denver, Colorado. I'm a member of the Erotic Service Provider Union, as well as a board member of the Service Provider Legal Education and Research Project. I have been an erotic service provider now going on 20 years. And regarding this Summer Institute training, this was my second training. This one was on the West Coast. The previous year, I went to one on the East Coast. Pretty much very similar. They have these all over the United States, and that's something I thought I would share a little bit more, just kind of the basics of these trainings. Different members of unions from all sorts of industries in that region of the United States will converge and come together for these trainings. They'll send someone, and the trainings are held. Oh wait, hold on. Sorry. And this is for the purpose of learning to better organize, share their organizing skills with others, network, and also to build morale. And then the unions lend their political muscle to each other in solidarity. When they did the action that Kristen was just talking about, those were people from all sorts of unions that were at this training that were coming to support this particular union. The labor movement is not new. It's been around a long time. They know what they're doing. There is institutional memory within the labor movement regarding what works, what doesn't work, and there's a constant education. This is something that would be awesome for our movement to develop, is that institutional memory within the movement where we, figure out what doesn't work and what works and so forth, and share our knowledge with each other. And as Maxine pointed out, the trainings, all sorts of topics such as dealing with the media, down to the details pertaining to direct actions, protests, lobbying, talking points, all sorts of the various facets of fighting for labor rights. The trainings focus on, just whatever you're going to need to know. And it's pretty awesome that, they have it figured out. This is not reinventing the wheel. The systems that we are engaging, are what they are, and learning how to do it effectively and in a unified way, an effective way, would be really, really huge for us. The other aspect of going that had a powerful effect on me was watching such a diverse group of people from all sorts of walks of life. These are all working class people, but they're just all different kinds of people unifying and coming together in such a wonderful way, mobilizing solidarity. And the main thing I noticed was that, and Kristen pointed this out, it's about the shared values. When those women were first, they don't understand, they're outsiders looking in, but when they get a chance to, learn a little bit about us, and then they realize that we are working class people too. And we share a lot of the same values. And, having that opportunity to communicate, that, is pretty powerful. But we do have shared values, earning a living, taking care of our families, wanting justice, wanting a living wage, wanting to be able to negotiate in our own working conditions and having control of our own labor and all that. They're going to understand and relate to that. And I think that attending these trainings for people in our community, I really hope that more and more activists in the sex worker rights community will start going to them. We need to be decriminalized to get to the table, but we have a lot of work to do. Once we're decriminalized, that's when the real work begins, and we're going to have to be effective around getting control and maintaining control of our labor. And, if we were decriminalized today, we wouldn't exactly be in the best position to do that. But, the more training that we get, the better. And we're going to be able to fight those regulatory schemes more effectively. And I'm pretty tired of losing. And I think it would be amazing for us to finally get on solution cycle and getting skills. And I'm listening to Kristen and Maxine. It's like, wow. The information that we can get from the labor movement, and they do by and large embrace us. They're glad for us to be there. When I mentioned that I was with the Erotic Service Provider Union, people were just like, yes, right on. We are so glad you're here. And they wanted to hear more and know more and support. It was awesome. And I think that's something in and of itself that is very valuable to us when we have been faced with just hate, so much hate and stigma, that, it's just such a different thing to be embraced by other people, working class people who get it and understand, and who are also going to support us in a variety of ways. But, we're not reinventing the wheel. The longstanding systems that are in place that we're having to engage are there, and there are ways to engage them that are going to be more effective and ways that are going to crash. And, I think that, going to labor trainings, I know going to labor trainings is going to make a huge difference. Just one time going, the first time I went, it blew my mind. And really gave me so much, a stronger foundation to stand on. And then I also think about how, wow, we can be helping each other to, training your replacement, always training your replacement. And social change, something else I've been studying lately around labor movement organizing is how social change, comes about through the actions of many, not just, a few people that are leaders, but, the actions of many in a combined effort. And it would be just awesome for it to become a part of our DNA. One of the quotes that I learned from one of the first organizing I went to was from Ida Inez Torres. And she's, pretty famous labor organizer. And her quote is, "Build ladders to climb, then lower that ladder so someone else may rise." And this is in the DNA of the labor movement. And, you know, I'd love for this to be a part of the DNA of our movement, that we are constantly, you know, helping each other to rise up and edifying each other and strengthening one another. But that was the biggest thing, was I love the solidarity too. I just cried my eyes out, you know, the way everybody was unified. It was just amazing. I would love for that to be for our movement. Thanks.
Wow. Well, thank you, Elle. I'd like to start. I'm looking at the YouTube and I don't see anyone else. So if it's okay, I'll just start asking questions.
Yeah.
Maxine, I was made aware, I went to a labor meeting the other day in Santa Rosa, and I was made aware of the housekeepers at Hyatt Santa Rosa who want a contract. And so you mentioned that some people got bussed over to the Hyatt. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so part of the labor or the Summer Institute for Union Women School is always doing a direct action. And so there's always a labor struggle nearby wherever we are. And we happen to be at Sonoma State this year. The class was held from July 10th to July 14th. And so there's always, you know, they put us on these big, huge coach buses, and the whole school, 250 of us, gave us lunch boxes. And by the time we got over to the Hyatt, you know, there were several organizations that were there. Unite Here was there, you know, who is the main organizer of those hotel workers. The hotel workers had gotten the union to agree that, you know, they were going to recognize that they had recognized the union, that the workers had already been organized in a secret organizing campaign and had signed, you know, their union cards before the owners of the Hyatt even got word that there was a campaign to organize the workers. So really the issue was getting support from the public to force those owners to sign the contract that the workers had written, that the workers wanted. So in busing, you know, the 250 people over there, Unite Here and Jobs for Justice, the North Bay, which is the group that I did my co-workshop with at the summer school, all had their signs. So everybody had a sign to carry. There were several people in the protest who helped direct us where we were marching, because we had to march on the public sidewalks. We couldn't go on to the Hyatt property. We were given out our chants on paper, both in English and in Spanish. We had some chant leaders. And so the Hyatt sits on a corner. So essentially we had two groups of protesters, one on each corner bordering the Hyatt. And we chanted and marched for about probably about an hour, and then a bunch of the, as in usual protests, you know, if you've ever been to the protests, you know, Jobs for Justice asked that, you know, everybody attend at least 4 or 5 of these protests every year, you know, to make sure you're out there and you're visible and you're helping your, you know, your neighbor get their collectively bargained contract. And so then the workers came and spoke to the crowd. The organizers came and spoke to the crowd, and the Jobs for Justice. There was also one of the Santa Rosa council members came and spoke to the protesters, and just really speaking out about the issues that this particular workforce was facing and supporting them. And the workforce was extremely uplifted and grateful, both, you know, spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically exhilarated, you know, by the force of the crowd that was there. People would be honking as they were driving by in support. And then about an hour and a half of protesting, the workers at the Hyatt went and presented a petition to the manager of the Hyatt. And the petition said, you know, we are the signed people and we want this contract. We want a date and time where we're going to sit down and get this contract, you know, completed. And at first, of course, like a boss, the manager was, well, I don't know if I can take that contract or that petition. You know, I don't know if I can legally accept it. I have to go ask the bigger boss, which is a typical boss tactic, right? To deflect, you know, try to throw off the workers. And he, you know, he said he would be back in 5 minutes, and the workers waited 8 minutes, and they were like, well, should we continue waiting out here? Is he stalling us? Is he going to ditch us? What's he going to do? He did come back out. He did accept the petition. And, you know, so that's an important direct action to the bosses to let them know, hey, this is a big community. We support this contract, and you need to move, you know, get off your butts and move it along and get it signed. So
Wow.
it'll be a good day. Yeah. So it was very exciting. It was very exciting.
So the housekeepers were saying that sometimes they have to clean 28 rooms, whereas in another hotel with a union, they only clean 15 rooms. So was that in the contract that they only have to clean 15 rooms?
Yes, the workers did talk about that when they were addressing the protesters, that, you know, they were trying, that the hotel, the Hyatt was trying to force them, you know, to clean 28 rooms, which is a day, which is impossible. And, you know, it's a setup to fail. You know, a worker's not going to be able to do a good job. And then, you know, if you're forced to try to complete, you know, a quantity over the quality, you know, the workers are going to be held responsible. So that's one of the functions of a union in your collectively bargained contract, is to be reasonable. You know, to your contract has to be based on human, you know, humanity. It has to, you know, be for humans. It can't be for, you know, it can't be inhuman conditions or conditions that are set up for the workers to fail. So then the bosses can turn around and say, well, you're doing a bad job, you know, you're fired, or, you know, your union is, you know, yucky, or you can't deliver the goods. So those are just types of strategies that, you know, bosses always try.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Geez, I'm so glad they got their contract signed.
Well, they didn't. They didn't get their contract signed. They got the message through to the you know, to the owner, you know, to the management, that, you know, you need to move along with this contract. You need to get this contract signed. You know, that's what the action was about, is to force them on to the next right thing.
I see. All right. I'd like to move on and ask Kristen a question. Kristen, when you first started talking about the class, you said that there were 2 women there who helped. They gave you ideas for applying how advanced their labor movement is to us, whereas our labor movement is not well developed. Did they have any ideas for how we could move forward and become more developed in our labor movement?
Well, I think when I meant they applied ideas, like, for instance, there were things such as negotiating a labor contract or filing a complaint. Like, so they were talking about the process of filing a complaint. We really just can't file a complaint. I don't know who we'd file it to. You know, I mean, that would just go into dead air. So as we were talking after the first day, I was saying, well, I'm trying to figure out how to apply this to our movement, because we are so far behind, where they can talk about, like, there's a base level of rights their workers are expected to have or expected to get, and it's absolutely reasonable that they could ask for it and fight for it. We still aren't even at the place where it's reasonable for us to ask for our rights in some people's eyes. It is reasonable, and we are going to fight for our rights and ask for our rights. But some people sort of have that logic, well, but you're criminalized. You know, why would you want rights? You know, this leads to exploitation. So we're fighting still so much stigma and stereotype and the criminalization of our industry that sometimes where they were is so far, you know, where they are is so far ahead of where we are. Now, that doesn't mean we can't use the information. So that's why when they were saying, well, we're talking about the boss, like, for instance, like how a boss keeps people disorganized so they can't organize and get things done. I looked at that as how, and after working with one of the women, like I looked at that as how basically, wow, is that weird? Can you hear this?
I think that must be me.
Okay. Can you guys hear me? I can't hear anybody else. It's sort of flashing. Okay, it stopped. That was crazy.
Yeah.
I think we lost our moderator.
I can hear you just fine, Kristen. Go ahead.
Okay.
She'll get back on.
Okay. So, so what one of the women there did was very wonderful. As we began talking, she said, well, these same principles would apply to basically what the government does and what policymakers do and what the anti-groups do that keep you guys suppressed. And even, you know, it could happen within our industry, such as the hopelessness and things like that. Like, we have to guard against that. Like, there is hope. We will change this. It's a matter of time, but we will change it. You know, and so it was things like that. I had to take what they've done and make it work for us. You know, because we aren't where they are. Like, we aren't. I mean, I am so glad they're where they're at, but we have to step back a few feet and go, okay, so we're working at a little deficit here, you know? And they were amazing helping me doing that. So that was sort of the, what I was talking about. So I think we lost our moderator, like I said.
Oh, well.
Elle, did you want to talk about something else? Because Maxine and I have both spoken. Do you want to talk about something else? I can't hear you.
I was on mute. Oops.
Oh, there you are.
Sorry about that. I just really love hearing, you know, what you guys learn. And you know, Kristen, this being your first labor training, I was like, wow. I mean, it's just awesome that you attended, and you obviously, you know, learned a lot. And this is all going to translate into great stuff for our people and our community. And I just love that. And then also, you know, to share that, what we learn with others, with each other, we can just keep passing it on. And I just, you know, really hope that our community, you know, the light bulb goes off and we're like, okay, because even though the labor movement, yes, they've been around a long time, they're ahead of us. They're also decriminalized workers. They're not criminalized like we are, but we can still gain so much from the knowledge that they have. Just the most basic things, and how detailed orientated they are in terms of how they protest, how they collect data. They're great teachers for us, and also they have political muscle. And when it comes to, you know, time for us, you know, we will have networked with all of these other working class people, and you know, we can be, you know, they're allies. They are allies. So, you know, I'd like to see worker centers in all of the, you know, 50 states that are sex worker centers. That would be amazing. You know, and you know, some of these other parts of our industry, you know, dancers, cam workers. I mean, there's just so many different ways that you know, unionizing would benefit people, even the, you know, everybody. But she's not popping on, so I don't know. I'll take over being moderator for now. Do you guys have anything else you would like to finish up saying? Anything, Maxine?
So yeah, I just wanted to, the last thing you said there, Elle, is that, you know, we need to get the sex worker rights movement into the labor rights movement. That, you know, we need to become, you know, part of that, you know, that group. Because that's where, you know, we're going to get the training, we're going to get the vision to be able to move forward, you know, with other groups of workers who have faced exactly the same things that we are facing. You know, there are many people in the labor movement who are not documented. You know, they don't have legal status here in the United States. The domestic workers are one of those groups of workers. And we had 2 groups of those tables at our workshop on organizing non-traditional and invisible workers. We had it simultaneously translated into Spanish. They're primarily Spanish speakers. And this particular group of women is really powerful in California. They had a piece of legislation that was passed a couple years ago that lined out their rights. You know, that they have the right to breaks. They have the right to, you know, overtime after 8 hours. They have the right to vacation time. So, you know, regardless of your legal status, you can still, you know, get moving towards your own rights. And certainly in the sex industry, we have the legal sector workers like the adult film performers, exotic dancers, webcam performers, and they can, even though they might be independent contractors, they can still collectively bargain those contracts. They can still come and figure out together, you know, what kind of contracts they want to offer, and to see, you know, some minimum standards set into their industry. Some of those industries already have some legislation at the you know, California state level, you know, regulation boards that oversee them. And, you know, if those laws and regulations aren't working, then they need to change them to be working. And those are collective actions, certainly. Certainly decriminalization and changing our legal status, because we're the largest sector of, you know, the prostitutes are the largest sector in the sex industry. Workers, you know, we can come together and collectively bargain with the general public who are our bosses, legislators who are our bosses, to change our legal status. It's something we can do. We can organize about that. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. And I'm so glad that the 2 of you got to attend. You know, I hope that next year we can see more people, activists from the sex industry, start to come and start to frame their activism from a worker perspective, because I think it's more direct. It's gonna work better for us in the short and the long haul. So thank you both for attending.
Well, thank you.
I wanted to mention this book real quick by Gregor Gall, An Agency of Their Own. It's 97 pages. You can get it in a Kindle, but it's generally anywhere from $5 to $12 online. Sex Worker Union Organizing. And there is some very interesting history and some really interesting perspective in this. And, you know, just to get started, it would be, I think, a good book for sex worker labor rights activists to get. And these union trainings are all over the United States. So no matter where someone lives, you know, there's going to be a training, you know, not clear across the other side of the country. So we can, you know, there are different trainings that people can go to, and it would be great. And maybe we should figure out some way to set up that information so that we can announce that stuff to people, so that they'll know when these trainings are happening and all that good stuff. So. That's all I've got to say. Anybody else?
I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you guys later.
We can do it.
Yes. Si se puede.
Yeah.
Bye.
There will be links underneath the video to the book, to anything that we mentioned. So be sure and check it out after it's recorded. Information will be available to people. Please subscribe. Please share the information, share the channel, like the videos, RT, whatever you can to help support the channel. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Elle.